Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for techies and non-techies who work in the techie world whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We're here to provide solutions that will help both the techie and non-techie live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the personal development and IT communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Our guest today is Amanda Graham, and Amanda Graham is a licensed professional counselor and an executive in a large mission-driven managed care company. She has now incorporated all of her life experiences to partner with people and organizations to guide them in creating transformational change. She has taken risks, listened to her inner wisdom, and said yes to opportunities that seemed out of reach at the time. She now guides and supports others to develop the skills to do the same thing. She is an LPCC and as well as an organizational development consultant. What Amanda is going to speak about today is mindfulness in the workplace. You may have heard other people speak about it, but I know Amanda is great. So let's bring her to the table and see what she has to say about mindfulness in the workplace. Welcome to the show, Amanda Graham.
Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate being on. And I know from listening to some of your other podcasts that I'm speaking to a kindred spirit when we talk about mindfulness in the workplace. But
Absolutely.
I'm very excited about this because I think it is so important to all of us as professionals. There are so many different variations and definitions of mindfulness, and having practiced mindfulness for probably 30 years on my own and having taught in various settings mindfulness in the workplace as well as mindfulness for health, I've come to understand it in a much broader way, and I think that's really a value, and that's part of what I want to share with your listeners.
I'm sure we look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. So mindfulness traditionally is described as a quality of awareness that we bring to the present moment. And I know if you're like me, you hear something like that and you think, well, yeah, but what does that really mean? And what's in it for me? And I think the key to that is that when we practice mindfulness, and we'll be talking about some different techniques down the road about sitting meditation, informal practices such as eating meditation, or something as simple as perhaps a purposeful pause during your day. What happens when we do that, Joanne, is that we create a feeling of expansiveness. We create space in our lives. And the one common concern I've heard from both my clinical clients as well as the people that I work with in organizations is this feeling that there's just not enough time. There's just not enough time to get whatever it is done. And that seems to be this pervasive feeling, creates this feeling of dis-ease, of unease. And I think what we all want, that's the other common theme, is that I think what we all want is a feeling of peacefulness. For many of us, a feeling of purpose and mission and meaningfulness is important. But for some people, it may not be so much so. For some people, it's simply a matter of having more ease and more comfort in their lives. And I think when we practice these mindfulness techniques, like any practice, it doesn't happen immediately. You sometimes have to do it even when you don't want to develop that muscle of expansiveness. But even if you don't practice it every day, even if you just practice it in certain moments, any practice at all can really help us expand the space around those feelings of not enough time, not good enough, and how am I going to get this done?
Well, there you go. That's perfect. It's a perfect definition of what mindfulness is and how it invades our space in a good way every day, and how you have come up with techniques and tools to use it purposefully.
Yes. And I think one of the common things, again, that comes up for people is, well, I don't have time to meditate, or like my husband says, my mind's too busy. And I can't do that. I can't take time to just follow my breath. And the good news and the bad news is our brains are designed to create thoughts. That's what they're designed to do, and they're really good at it. So the average brain will create about 300 to 600 thoughts per minute. Now that's a lot going on up there.
Good Lord.
And I think it's astounding, isn't it?
Yeah, it
so
is.
With all of that going on, that discursiveness, it's not surprising that we have this feeling that our to-do lists are chasing us. And really, it's not so much our to-do list, it's our thinking. So as we begin to practice mindfulness, the first thing we will notice, if we do even just a few slow, deep breaths, focusing on our breath, we'll notice there's a lot of thinking going on. And the good news is, as I said, is that that's normal. And we're not ever going to get rid of those. We're not going to stop thinking. And so if we know that's a given, what techniques, what practices can we do in any moment to just recenter ourselves and bring ourselves back into this moment rather than the moment that we're living in our head? Sometimes the present moment is not so pleasant. We might be working on a deadline. We might have some sort of physical problem, some pain that we're dealing with. We may be in crisis and have some emotional issues, or we may have a CEO or an executive leader who is suddenly told his company is merging with another one. There's so many things that can come up. But if we can practice the mindfulness techniques, we can deal with the reality of what is rather than our thoughts about the reality. And what I mean by that, I think about project managers. I work with them a lot. Now, no one is more focused on status and deadlines and target dates and Gantt charts than project managers. But even project managers, it's not so much chasing the details, it's just these worry thoughts about what's going to happen and not having enough time, or I'm not good enough, or this isn't going to turn out the way I had hoped, I'm going to lose my job over it. It's so easy for our minds to just take over our reality. And when those things happen, we lose sight of what's actually present. And usually the present is not nearly as painful and difficult as we make it in our mind. So part of what meditation and mindfulness is about taming our mind, not stopping our thoughts, but being able to rein things in such a way that we can accept them, even if we don't like them. We don't have to like something to accept it, but we can accept those moments, and then we can move on with what truly is rather than our thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's amazing what people can make up. A situation occurs. The company has purchased another company. There's another reorganization, and the negative stuff comes. I'm going to lose my job. I'm never going to find another job. I won't have my skills updated. They won't take care of me here. I'm a contractor. I'm an employee. Where do I stand? And so on and so on and so on. They just go mad with the possibilities, with the up to 600 thoughts per minute. I think that's what you said. And they don't even cover all of them, but it's amazing once you get on the negative side how you cannot stop being negative until you become aware that you are negative.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And once you become aware, awareness is certainly the first step. Then it's about how can I accept these thoughts without judging myself and punishing myself for this thinking. We are so hard on ourselves, and when we talk about creating compassion, the first place we have to start is with ourselves, and that's probably one of the hardest tricks of all of it. But we have to begin to recognize that there is nothing wrong fundamentally with who we are. There's simply thoughts, there's situations, but we are not fundamentally bad, we are good. And by working with our thoughts, we can begin to accept the things that we may not like as much for ourselves, but we can only through accepting them can we begin to change them. We can't change anything that we don't first accept. That's the reality.
Yeah, and
I think there's go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I like the way I talk to people about certain things is I want to change the groove in their brain. They have a rut in their brain where they go directly to whatever is their choice, but usually it's negativity. Yeah. They go directly to that, and they're not able to get out of that negative space without hard practice and creating a different groove in their brain that works for them, because that's and consistency over time is the key for that as well.
Yes. And I think you're talking about a groove. I think the groove we generally get into, as you say, is oftentimes negative. That's all. That serves a purpose, historically, for survival. If we assumed the worst, we weren't going to get eaten by that mountain lion, but we don't live in that world anymore.
I know.
And unfortunately, that's still there. The other piece of this that I think is helpful. I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just flashing. That was the reptilian brain, correct?
Yes. And that's a perfect segue, because the reptilian brain, the amygdala, is where our fear, where our emotions live. And it is you can't negotiate with the amygdala, with the limbic system, with the reptilian brain. What we have to do is recognize it and give it a pathway for when it does show up to respond differently. And I think there are different parts of our brain. We talk about the left brain and the right brain. We talk about the reptilian brain. We talk about the mammalian brain. And I think one of the concepts that really resonates for me, and hopefully will with your listeners, is this notion that most of our worry thoughts, most of our concerns about the future and our judgment and our definition of ego come from what we call our left brain. The left brain is the one that's analytical, that's planning, that's very logical, that gets us to places on time, that makes judgments. And in a workplace, traditionally, that's where we spend most of our time. We're not often invited to engage with the right side of our brain, which is a part of ourselves that is creative, that has empathy, that's very expansive, sees in pictures, and the mental chatter there is gone. And we know this because of a wonderful book that Dr. Jill Stolke-Taylor wrote called My Stroke of Insight. And she's a neuroscientist who actually had a stroke and lost her left brain attributes. Now, this is a woman who'd worked in science, and what she discovered is all the things I just described that we thought were true about the right side of the brain, the creativity, the expansiveness, the empathy. That's what she found. And thankfully, over the past 6 or 8 years, she has come back from that and gone on to write a book. She also did a wonderful TED Talk for those of you who might want to hear that. But she confirmed this notion that there's a whole part of our brains that we really don't access very much. And part of what meditation does is allows us to access that creative wisdom, the intuition, and the parts of ourselves that can help us not just think about something, but experience something to come up with the right answers.
I'm listening. Keep going.
Okay.
This is good. This is good.
Okay. So I think that the other piece of this is about what can we actually do? What are some things that we can actually do to create this? Because obviously, if this is something that will benefit us in our lives and our work, then it's something we want to do. And I would also like to put out there the notion, I keep thinking about this work-life balance framework, which we all use. And, I'm beginning to think, can we frame it just in terms of we have a life? And some things in our lives have to do with making money and making meaning, and some parts of our lives have to do with family. But really trying to not define that so clearly so that we can really use all of these skills over our continuum of life. If we can change something in our personal side of life, can we then extrapolate that into our other parts of our life? Because it will change who we are.
Well, I know work-life balance is, again, another overused term. And the way I define work-life balance to my people is peace. If you are at peace, you can make a choice, and any choice that you make, be it work, family, friends, whatever, will be fine. There is no stress, no problems. We just choose. Mm-hmm. But when we're not in a place of peace, we cannot choose. We cannot choose freely because we're always judging ourselves, and we're judging the situation, we're judging our choices, we're judging the other, whoever the other is, the other be work or family or fill in the blank. But if you're at peace, then you could choose, and there is no energy on anything. I mean, it's a divine place I'd like people to get to, peace and joy, but I'm going to continue working in that arena. But I call it work-life balance, and somebody just retitled one of my talks to life-work balance, but that doesn't change the dynamic. It's still, it's not 8, 16, 24 hours doing this or that. It's choosing at any time to do the thing that works best in your life at that time with no judgment on yourself, pretty much. I mean, that's the very broad view. And
I love that.
Okay.
I love that. I think you just defined kind of where I was going with the continuum of life. I think that's a lovely definition. And certainly peace is something that we're all looking for. And judgments get in the way of that. And so often we begin to think that our thoughts and our judgments are true. I think that's one of the most dangerous things is we begin to label people, we label ourselves, and the next thing we know, we're beginning to think that those labels are true. And that's where we really get into a very unpeaceful place.
Well, they become attached. And once we become attached with cement and glue and rubber bands and paper clips, it's very difficult to become unattached or detached. People, again, also have the incorrect definition of detachment. It's just letting go of the things that you were just talking about, the judging of ourselves and letting ourselves be judged by others and holding on to that as a truth when it's not.
Yeah.
And that's what mindfulness, as you presented, can do.
Yes. It creates the space for us to hold all of that. We can hold it without being attached to it. We can hold it, we can let it go, but it's whenever we push against something, we are creating a feeling of dis-ease. So when we have thoughts that we're trying to push away, that just gives them energy. So if we can hold them in a mindful place by that expansiveness, accepting, even though we don't like it, that allows us the opportunity to let them go like you would balloons or air bubbles. There are a lot of great images that meditation instructors use for that. But it is about creating a place of peace in our lives, whether it's meaningful work or purposeful life. Just having peace, I think, is one of the common threads that we all share. And when we remember that, and we're in the office, and we have that person who drives us crazy sometimes, and he or she comes to our office, we can say to ourselves very quietly, just like me, that person wants peace. Just like me, that person wants a sense of happiness in their lives. And again, that is a place of mindfulness and expansiveness that can help open the door to more creativity, more ability to focus on what's important at work and at home. But it requires some practice. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those, if I may.
Please go.
Okay. I think most people are familiar with your traditional meditation practices, and I'm obviously on a podcast not going to go into a practice of those, but I would encourage people, my hope, Joanne, is that people who are hearing this perhaps are hearing it in a different way because this is not necessarily new information, and it will trigger them to do some research or maybe to go to that class or to look into something related to mindfulness practice that maybe they haven't before. So that's part of my hope, but there's a tremendous number of meditation practices, but the most basic one is just bringing our attention to our breath. And by that, I mean literally breathing in, breathing out, and not thinking about it, but allowing the experience of the breath in the body. The more we can engage with our breath, the more we're going to connect the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, the right, the left. It integrates us. It integrates our whole heart and our whole spirit and our whole mind. And those are things that we need at work, whether we call them that or not. We need to have access to all of the wisdom that's in our bodies. So being able to practice meditation, even if it's 2 minutes in the morning, 3 deep breaths before you walk in the door to work or to home, depending if you want to let go of that. Another variation of that is something called a purposeful pause. And that is something I have definitely used at work, which is simply, like many people, I go from meeting to meeting to meeting. And sometimes I go into a meeting and I'm still in the last meeting that I left. So literally taking just a few moments between meetings to stop in the hallway, allow yourself to breathe, because what that does is it interrupts that momentum, that freight train, that progression of all those 300 to 600 thoughts, and it stops them for just a moment. And every time we do that, we create a little bit more space in our lives. And through that space is where we can find our peace. The last couple of ones I think that are important, I think certainly there's been some research that I was reading about yesterday about the importance of people finding meaning in their lives and things that engage them day to day. So we might all have the aspiration that we're going to do meaningful work, and hopefully we're able to do that. But even day to day, keeping our employees and ourselves engaged requires having something that we're excited about every day. And that's up to us to try to figure out what that is. So first identifying what are our values at our deepest core, not just the list that we chop off, when asked that quickly, but really taking some reflection time in meditation or in a quiet moment of asking those questions. What are the things that are important to me? What are those qualities that I value? And finding out from an inner place what those things are and being able to align some of our work every day with those values. And the more that we can do that, the more we stay engaged with whatever it is we're doing, whether it's playing with our kids or working on a project plan. The final thing I would like to suggest, is reflection and contemplation. This is a similar type solution or practice from the meditation. When we go into that place of quiet, sometimes we have questions in our work too, not just finding our values, but we may be trying to solve a problem at work. We may be trying to solve something with our left brain. I know oftentimes, again, that's where we live. But being able to take some quiet time, whether it's at work, if you can't do it at work, do it when you're off or away from the office, to really hold that question in that quiet place, again, from a place of expansiveness and integration. And we can get there through, again, the basic practice of following our breath and letting go of our thoughts and accepting what shows up. But that's another way to do problem solving and come up with creative and innovative ideas that we would not come up with ordinarily if we were just using the left side of our brain.
Well, I'm all for using the right side of one's brain. For years, I was working in a left brain world, but I was a right-brained person, and I took some studies under a woman, Arlene Taylor, and she talked about the four sides of the brain, two on the lower left, the lower right, as well as the upper left and the upper right, and how they incorporated different skills and aspects than I had been aware of before. I remember me sitting in the back of the room just bouncing out of the chair because I never knew that before. This was several years back, but still. And I think that what you've come up with, people, with this purposeful pause, I like that a lot. And I think that it's the way you've titled it, the purposeful pause, which is a good title for a book, by the way.
Thank you.
Just saying, with a nice, subtitle explaining a little bit. But what I tell people when they listen to these podcasts, if they've gotten this far, I tell them to listen to it again, because there's no way they could have gotten all your years of experience just by listening to 20 some odd minutes of your work. So I want people to know that they can find you. Your website is AmandaGrahamLPC.com. That's Amanda, AmandaGrahamL as in Larry, P as in Peter, and C as in, Chester, I guess, .com, LPC. I don't know any C's, and I don't know the military version of all of these letters. So it's important. So before we say goodbye to our audience, but not to each other, what can you tell people right now, if there is one thing that you can suggest that they do, what would that be?
My suggestion would be, sometime today, find a place where you can sit quietly, put your feet on the ground, put your back against the chair, and close your eyes and take 3 minutes and just feel your breath in your body and see what that brings to you.
There you go, people. 3 minutes, sit up straight, somewhere quiet. And if you can't find any place quiet because you're at work, go to the restroom. It's the safest place in your building. And just sit there for a few minutes and follow your breath. Breathe in, breathe out, see what happens. Don't become attached. Just follow the yellow brick road. It'll be a movie. It'll be a movie.
There you go.
It'll be a movie that you haven't seen before. Okay, I want to thank Amanda Graham for being here today. We've worked a long time to get her here, and I'm so glad she's here. And I thank you for your skills that you've shared with us today, Amanda. And
Thank you.
Wish you the best in your project, not project management. What was it?
Organizational development.
Yes, organizational development. Well, as your private practice. And again, I want everybody to listen to this podcast again and again and again. Share it with your friends, share it at work, share it with anybody you want so that they know where you are at in the world and what you are striving for. I will also suggest that people go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com. And if you are not subscribed to my email list, please do so. I send out daily emails. And there's several places on my website that you can sign up for that. And my daily emails are under 300 words. They don't take you very long to read, and they seem to be effective. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for being here. And take care, Amanda. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to askjoannevictoria.com to listen to more podcasts and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Work-Life Balance. That's askjoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.